I'll quickly introduce myself and then ask each speaker to introduce themselves. I'm Andrew Bolis. In my last full-time role, I was a CMO. Currently, I'm a business growth consultant. I help companies leverage LinkedIn and AI tools to attract new customers in a cost-effective way. I'm based in the US, out of Chicago. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and I try to host one of these audio events every week or two. Linda, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Linda Melone. I am a certified conversion copywriter, founder of the Copy Worx. I specialize in B2B writing for health, wellness, and fitness, and I am based in Arizona.
Thank you, Linda.
I'm going to just go ahead and chime in now so that Tass doesn't have the opportunity to go before me. Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin Rapp. I am the Chief Creative Officer of Kevin Rapp Consulting. I do branding and content creation for startup and tech companies.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Taz, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, because now I get a 2-minute rant and intro about myself now that you're done. All right, Tass Bober, Tass like sass. My husband hates when I introduce myself like that, but people love to add a Z at the end of my name, and there's no Z. 15 years marketing, 13 in digital, unintentionally or intentionally, B2B, tech and non-tech. I've led a couple of digital departments. Most compelling statistic that people are apparently questioning me on is 400 website revamps. Right now, I work for myself. I'm the owner of Delphinium, and we offer digital marketing and data solutions for B2B companies. So happy to be here and talk to everybody.
Okay, thank you, Taz. And for anybody who doesn't know, Taz and Kevin have this thing about who goes first or who even gets mentioned first in a comment. So we've structured this event in 3 parts. Linda will cover copy that resonates with clients. Then Kevin will cover visual identity and brand. And Taz will cover metrics to measure and LinkedIn growth. So Linda, we'll go ahead and dive into the copy. Can you cover why a value prop is important and share tips to help someone express their value prop in 1 sentence?
Sure. Value proposition, that's one of the things that I find people don't have, especially B2B. Sorry, I said at the beginning, I have allergies, so this is really like an early morning for me. The thing with the value proposition is it's your statement on what sets you apart from your competition. And so you need to find that gap that is not being filled by everyone else. So this takes, and this is usually the first step I do with a client is, and it pertains also to what you want to present on LinkedIn, is a lot of research. What are people in your niche doing? What are they saying? What are customers saying? I do a lot of research in like social media, especially a site like Reddit, where people are really talking about unfiltered, how they really feel about what it is that they like or dislike about a particular product. And then the value proposition itself should follow five rules. It should be unique, desirable, specific, succinct, and memorable. So what I do is I use that criteria to rate, like when I first work with a client, like what are they currently saying about themselves? Does it meet all those criteria? And if not, what are their competitors doing? And I compare all of them and we come up with something. I usually come up with it and then they approve it of what it is that sets them apart. So that's why value prop is so important.
Yeah, I want to add on to that, Linda, because I see a lot of people on LinkedIn who are struggling with communicating what their value prop is. There might be creative freelancers or solopreneurs who are like, for me in the creative space, who are like, oh, I do really good work. And a lot of their messaging is around that they do good work. And here's the thing, there are a lot of different freelancers that do good work. There are a lot of different creative agencies that do good work. Mm-hmm. You have to be more tactical about what you provide. You have to show what your business model is. You have to show what makes you unique aside from quality, because people can find quality in a lot of different places. For me, I communicate that I build systems of video content that allow brands to get a lot of value and a lot more content for lower budget dollars. That's something that's differentiated. That's something that's in this space unique. And that's what a value proposition needs to be. If you have something that feels really generic, you're going to have a really challenging time selling yourself and selling your services to other companies in this space.
Right.
I want to double down on the Reddit comment. I think it's such an underrated hack to find out what people actually think about you. It's when you leave the room, what are people saying? And because they can anonymize who they are, they're very real and brutal about your product and what they think. But it's an opportunity for you to either join the conversation or take some of those and turn it into, this is what people say about us, and then here's how we can combat that. I think Drift did this really well, where they were asking customers why they were churning or why they were leaving, and then took some of those and actually created content on their website to support some of the things that they were saying, and then saying, this is how we combat all of those things. Yeah, leveraging something like Reddit or these forums where people are talking about you, that's one of the best things you can do. And then in terms of the value prop, there's not that many original ideas left. Excuse me. But yeah, it's just how you sell yourself, right? Are there other people who do websites? Yeah, there are developers, there are designers, there are people who do that. There are full-scale agencies that do that. The difference is, I think of it as 3 levers. So if you have your design lever, development lever, but then who's thinking about the revenue lever? And that's where I come in and I'm saying, I don't want to just redesign your site, but what is the end goal? How are we going to get you there? And let's optimize that to get us there on whatever that journey is. So yeah, you can just take a very common idea, but what's your spin on it?
Or if you want to know what people are saying about you when you're not in the room, you can just ask Tass, who will say the things to your face that most people have the decency to say behind closed doors, and then will tag you in them publicly.
My mom called me, what was it, blindly optimistic and tactlessly honest. So yes, if you're very curious, I'm happy to let you know what other people are saying about you, specifically Ken.
Okay. Yeah, no, I like all those tips, and I like too that you can just go to Taz instead of even spending time on Reddit. Okay. Okay, so Linda, when it comes to brand voice, that's a phrase that's often used by companies. How can an individual create a brand voice on LinkedIn?
You want to first define your brand pillars. So establishing what are your core values, your skills, and the attributes that define you professionally. Are you an innovator, a thought leader, even though I think that term is overused a lot, a skilled communicator? And then you hear this all the time. You have to be consistent using, like with your post, a consistent tone, the language style, make your profile easily identifiable. 3 out of 4 of us have purple backgrounds. That pops. Audience awareness. You want to know your audience. This can't be undervalued because we talk about this a lot, but what is your audience expecting from you? And you want to tailor your voice to resonate with potential clients. And then also content strategy. So you want to mix up the types of posts, the content that you post. So a lot of it is just testing. Like I've done a lot of text and video, and like lately video has really short videos have gotten the best engagement. And that's the last thing is you want to engage with other people. Don't just broadcast what you're doing. I think that it takes the most time, but it's the most valuable. Even on days that I don't have time to post something original, I will go in and just engage with people and just let them know I'm here. And then that's how people can also see your personality. Because sometimes when you post something, it's not really your personality. It's just, I think this would be important for people to know. When you get in the comments, you can be funny. I use more humor in the comments, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I call it like the LinkedIn mullet, which is when I post, I'm all business. And then when I comment, it's a party. And a lot of my growth has come from the commenting. And actually, let's see if he's here, but most of my interactions, even meeting Kevin, which you could say is a defining period in my life, came from going back and forth in comments. That's a lot of the relationships I have in here with folks like Jill and other people here have all been meeting in the comments section, showing a little bit of that personality. And yes, LinkedIn mullet, copyrighted.
So I think everyone they tend to sanitize themselves for LinkedIn, right? They try to put up a professional veneer, where LinkedIn used to be a site of like resume graveyards. And I think some of that I have to be professional has filtered into this space where it hasn't filtered into other social channels. And the things that really stand out to me when I'm looking through these profiles isn't someone's professional experience, it's their voice. It is the way they have to say something that is unique. And so when I'm building my own content, I am very clear about making sure that my authentic voice and my authentic personality, and sometimes that means I use the word butthole in a carousel, and that's just my vibe. But I think about it like not just building a brand voice, but building a brand character, building a personality for myself that's in an online personality that is similar to the way someone might write a fictional character for a television show. You understand the way they would communicate something. For example, if somebody was doing a profile about a local public servant in the parks department, the voice of Ron Swanson as a LinkedIn character would be very different than Tom Haverford or Leslie Knope, right? You can picture in your head what that would sound like as they communicated online, and apply that same level of rigor and structure in the way you communicate so that you come across as an authentic and unique voice in the space.
Yeah, I love that, Kevin. And I think that makes it too, so that people are looking forward to your posts and what even your angle on certain topics, because they know it's going to be unique or different. So Linda, let's talk more about how can someone weave an authentic narrative into their LinkedIn posts, and how do they do that potentially without oversharing or appearing unprofessional, or is oversharing and being unprofessional okay at times?
Everyone's going to have, excuse me, a different opinion on that. I don't know. To me, it should be common sense. But one of the keys to keep in mind, excuse me, is to, when you share an accomplishment, so you want to have a story arc where you connect it to something that shows growth or challenges or evolution. And a lot of people do this. I think most people know that, but not always. So you start with a story, and I once posted about how I got $42,000 in debt from going into all these courses and how much money I wasted and what I learned from that. So there's the story was that it took me like 5 years to dig out of this. What did I get out of it? So you want to have something that's related to this story. So even if it's personal, there should be some kind of a business. It doesn't have to be, you don't want to force it. It should be something somewhat related. And then also, yeah, just to be compelling and to be open about your journey, but not push the boundaries. I mean, I don't go for the crying on social. I don't like crying on any social media, but I think on LinkedIn, it's really not appropriate. And the rule that I was taught by a coach years ago, he said, you want to post about something. If something upset you that much, then post about it after you've overcome it, not while you're in the middle of it. And I think that's a good rule to follow.
Just don't be a weirdo. You can be a weirdo in a good way. Just don't be like a weirdo in like a unsettling, cringe way.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I do think it's a balancing act too, because I think if you come across as very robotic, professional, and buttoned up, I think people tune you out too. So I think being able to show different sides of your personality is important as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Linda, how can you tailor your LinkedIn post to serve more than one objective without diluting your brand or your voice?
I think you want to decide on what content buckets you want to have. So for me, I talk about copywriting, and I use that platform to showcase some of my work, sometimes do before and afters of what I've done. But I also talk a lot about marketing, because copywriting is part of that. And now I've recently switched my niche to health, fitness, and wellness, mainly because I did that for 20 years and I wasn't really talking that much about it. I'm like, I'm a perfect fit for this. So those would be my buckets, but mainly for me, it would be copywriting, marketing. So decide where you want to, have your expertise, how you want people to know you, and then just stick to those, but have them be in that same realm. Once in a while, you can put something like a personal thing on the weekend. Hey, I went kayaking or something, but for the most part, I think you want to keep it really focused on a few buckets. Does that make sense?
There are a lot of brands that have been able to sell a lot of different products and live in a lot of different spaces. You don't go to Target just for groceries, right? Like they have built a brand identity that allow them to be flexible and malleable. So if you have a layer of brand that lets you be trusted in different spaces. You're able to articulate that you are more than just one thing, but you need to make sure that you have that level of authenticity and brand and authority before you're able to micro niche out into different spaces.
Yeah, let me add to that. Earlier this week, I was talking to a client and he was like, I really need to hone in on who I'm talking to and who the person is. And we were really focused on who the person it was that he was targeting. And I said, the thing is, what you're offering could help multiple people. Do you really want to isolate those people, which is going against the whole like niche thing? But I think you can also be niche outside of a target audience. You can be niche in terms of outcome. So you can have a niche outcome that can serve multiple people. So I love using Old Navy as an example, but we'll use Old Navy, who they have an outcome. You can dress for every season, and then they have that relevance within that time period. So right now, at least in Ohio or Idaho or wherever we are, we're entering into a colder season. They're going to say, okay, we can solve your issue. You need cold gear, and we have it for the whole family, and here you go. So we have it for the whole family, and then married with the time period, and you can really niche down based on that season. So I think sometimes niches aren't just for the target person, but also the target outcome.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I like that as well. And then, Linda, the last question is, if you feel like your LinkedIn profile isn't capturing your true voice or true value prop, how can you improve it?
We always talk about like the 3 C's. So clarity is first. You want to look at your headline summary with someone who knows nothing about you or your industry, like immediately know what it is that you do. So that comes back to the value prop. Consistency, look at your profile from top to bottom. Does your brand voice stay the same, or does it alternate from formal to casual? And consistency can really dilute your messaging. So make sure the tone and style is coherent. And then lastly, it's compelling value. Why would someone want to connect with you? If your profile doesn't provide like an answer to that, then you want to have something that's like that must connect. I need to know more about this person. And that's where your value prop comes in. So really those 3 things: clarity, consistency, and then compelling value.
Yeah, I like that. And it almost feel like a cohesive experience too when they're just going through your profile. So Linda, thank you for that. And then we're going to shift over to Kevin now and talk visual
Finally,
aesthetics.
jeez, Andrew.
So Kevin, why do visuals matter when building a personal brand?
Because LinkedIn is a boring space. Honestly, visually, you scroll through your feed and you see a lot of white and gray or black if you're a vampire and need to look in dark mode. There's little pops of color here and there of somebody's profile picture, and occasionally you'll see somebody's very curated selfie. But for the most part, when you look through and scroll through your feed, there's not a lot that visually entices you. There's a lot of text. And so people are relying mostly on hooks to grab someone's attention. So you'll see a lot of tips about hooks because that is the thing that most people know how to give tips on to grab an audience's attention. But there's another way, and that is to capture attention through a visually captivating brand. Have something that actually sticks out in a space that is generally very bland and neutral. And if you have a visually compelling identity, you're able to attract somebody's eyes to want to see your message. It's really about capturing brand awareness.
Do you have tips on what kind of image? Because I had heard, and it seems to be with me, if I use an image, I get less engagement. Yeah, what would you recommend?
I think it depends on what kind of images you've been using. If you're using photography, I think there's some turnoff to using photography. I think when I'm seeing people doing selfies, people are like, okay, why is there a selfie in this image? What does it have to do to tell the story? I think you need to have a visual that is, number one, compelling, something that is visually exciting, something that will draw someone's eye, something that has a lot of contrast, something that has a vibrancy, and something that is relevant to the message of what you have to say. Okay. Because when there's a disconnect between the image and your message, that's harming your brand credibility. If you're throwing in an image just to have a visual, it doesn't really serve a purpose, except for I want somebody to look at this more. But when you have something that's visually telling an interesting story that you are expanding upon, and you've invested the time into making, or invested the energy into making that visual something that's really polished, then you've got something that could perform well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll add that also, yeah, testing the type of imagery. One thing that people always say is LinkedIn isn't like Facebook, don't post personal stuff. But when I'm looking at the data, personal stuff just tends to do well. People want to know that they're talking to a human and not like a chat GPT clone. But so those tend to do really well. The other thing is any kind of visual framework. And I just posted this yesterday and it was a slow burn, but now it's taking off. And I did a chart on website redesigns and what are the different components there. And it's done really well. And I know that there are certain people who've built brands specifically on showcasing charts. And that's great because they're actionable frameworks that someone can take. And then with Kevin, I don't even need to read the hooks necessarily of his posts because he punches you in the face with these visuals. Even our event promotion was just like, wow, I'm obviously not going to produce anything close to that. So I just reposted it, which is great because then he creates the content and I just get to repost it. It really works in my favor. But that's where I think the type of visuals work. And one thing I've been testing lately are like memes or something funny, and they get less engagement, but that's when you need the help of multiple types of hooks in one content type of unit. You need like the verbiage, you need the image, you need those things to work together in order to capture someone's attention and keep it.
Yeah, those are great points. And Taz, I like your point too about using diagrams and visuals. I think those posts too stand out because some people find it easier to just look at the diagram to understand the concept versus having to read a lengthy text post explaining it. So Kevin, how do you create a brand that reflects who you are and the work you want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are a company or a person that is building a brand that is catering towards tech companies, and you look like you sell bait and tackle in like a small shop in Omaha, like you're not gonna have the results that you want. You need to start by looking at who your audience is, and you need to figure out what your message is, what your value prop is. Start with all of that work that Linda was talking about in terms of building a verbal brand of who you are and how you communicate, and then apply that same kind of structure to your brand identity, right? Like you can look for inspiration at other people in your same space. You can look for inspiration in terms of what resonates with your target audience, and then you can look inward at what your personality is and how you want to visually communicate who you are, because it should be reflective of you and the type of business that you want to own. It's called a brand for a reason. You are meant to represent yourself with the same level of authenticity and polish as any other brand. And I think a lot of us think because we're just one person that we don't need to have that same level of polish, or that we don't need, or that we don't deserve it, right? That it's a personal brand. It doesn't need to be something that's really unique, and it's something that needs to have that same level of production quality. But if you do apply that same level of rigor that a giant corporation does, you will really stand out and you will get some results from it.
What about changing? Like, does it ever change over time? Like your brand?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because brands are living, breathing things. Apple right now isn't what it was in the 1980s, right? Like they have evolved tremendously, and all brands evolve because over time their use cases change, the products and services that they offer change, they learn more about their customers, and so your brand should be a living and breathing thing. But there are core parts of your identity that will stay the same. There are aspects of your voice and tone that will stay consistent, even if you pivot into different spaces. So yeah, you be open to the fact that it can change, but start by applying some structures and frameworks that will allow you to be successful.
Kevin, those are great points. And then it brings me to my next question. How can someone build a strong visual identity if they're not a designer?
Yeah, not everybody's a designer, right? Like it's one thing to say, just have dope visuals that compete with Apple and Nike and world-class brands, right? When it comes to practicality and application of that philosophy, it's a lot of work. And the first thing I'd recommend is just hire a designer, right? Find a designer that understands brand identity and understands social and can help build you things like a profile picture that represents who you are, rather than just, okay, here's my picture with a colored background, which is a good start. It's something that's visually enticing, but there's ways to add another layer on top of that. For example, if you want to stand in front of a bunch of smoke bombs, that gives you something that's a little bit more visually enticing. Then they can also apply some design logic and give you an overall color scheme and identity, a set of graphics packages that you can use in your profile banners, in your carousels, all sorts of other things that will give you a structure that will help you really increase your brand visual identity. But if that's too much of an investment for you at this point, that could cost a couple $1,000s. One thing that you could do instead is first start by building a library of inspiration. Go around, look at print ads or digital banner ads, things that really catch your eye. Anytime you're scrolling on a website, take it and something catches your eye as an ad, take a screenshot. You go through your feed and something catches your eye, take a screenshot. Look at some of the things that are really catching your attention and take stock of it. And then say, okay, how can I get some of these elements and add those into my own brand? And you can buy some templates. There are lots of templates out there that you can buy, and that'll give you a low level investment into adding your own visual identity and give you the opportunity to start designing your own content that feels at a higher level.
Look at you giving away all this value for free.
I know, I'm just a value bomb.
And Kevin, and this might be a controversial question. What are your thoughts about
It's only controversial because of my answer.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think I know what you're going to say, but what are your thoughts about using AI tools for design?
My thoughts are eat shit, AI. My thoughts are don't use it. Okay, again, this is probably going to be a controversial thought, but okay. AI gets all of its work by taking the existing work of artists and designers and copywriters and basically putting that into a giant database that it steals from to create new content. And I say new with air quotes around it. So if you are building a brand identity that relies on AI, you are relying on stolen content, full stop. And the questions around that have legal and ethical concerns. Ethical are, do you really want to use the stolen work of other artists? Legal concerns in that I think there are going to be lawsuits in the coming days that, and so if you are relying on them now, there is a very good chance that you will not be able to rely on them later. So being able to create a standout brand that doesn't rely on a tool that might not be available forever is going to give you a better appreciation of your own brand and a better ability to move forward in the long run.
Yeah, I think those are good points. I think those are good points. I know recently there was a case where a judge ruled that you can't really copyright or protect anything AI generated, especially when it comes to design or art. So that is something to keep in mind too for brands, because if you create it and use it, it doesn't mean you can protect it.
Yeah, 100%. Because anything that you create, anybody else can have. You're using the same tool that everybody else has access to, and then you're creating a brand identity that then is fed into the machine that other creative can build off of. And so your brand is being used to train the machine that basically anybody else can take those elements that you have created. You don't own it. And I personally would rather own my own brand.
Yeah, AI can't replicate the actual smoke bombs you used in your profile picture.
Sure can. And it'd make your hands look weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is one of the signs that you can tell it's AI generated, usually by looking at the hands.
Jacked up fingers.
Yeah. And Kevin, the last question is, how does a strong brand lead to more revenue?
Yeah, when you're trying to build revenue for yourself or for a company that you're building, brand plays a really strong part. And this is something that I have had to convince startup founders of. So I'll convey the same advice to all of you. Whenever every single interaction that you have with your customers is a brand decision. The way that you communicate with your customers on a customer service call is a brand decision. The way that you communicate your value proposition is a brand decision. The way that you handle when a customer is dissatisfied with the service that you offered is a brand decision. These are brand decisions just as much as a Super Bowl commercial is, because brands are really the promise that you offer to your customers and how you live up to them. So when you're thinking about revenue, when you're thinking about building a business, you have to understand that every single interaction that your customer has with you is something that is brand related. So you need to know exactly what type of promise that you want to deliver to your customers and how you deliver upon them. And that's going to start with awareness, right? When a customer is aware of who you are and what you offer. And so when you build a strong foundation of your brand, you are starting to show what you can offer them and how you can deliver upon that promise. It leads to revenue because it starts that conversation. Anything that's content around brand awareness starts to show off who you are. It gives that first look into what that promise is going to be. And you continue to carry that across in every brand interaction that you have with them. So maintaining that consistency of what that experience is going to be like is what's going to give you that opportunity to make sales. You cannot have a conversion without someone being aware of you. And if you don't have a brand that stands out, that awareness isn't going to happen. So build a brand that demonstrates what that promise is and maintain consistency around it if you actually want to sell.
It seems like brands can be super fragile too. And we see all the time in the news about some company that does or says something that really ticks off a lot of people. And there's a million of examples I can give you. But is it that fragile? Brands, like the consistency is really what you're talking about, that you really need to maintain that and protect it.
Yeah, when you look at that, it's about trust, Linda, right? Trust is very hard to earn and very easy to break. It takes a really long time in relationships to build trust with people. And that is something that can be fractured with one bad decision, right? It's really hard to get people to believe in you. And it's very hard for someone to then immediately go back on that hard-earned trust. So consistency is important. And sometimes consistency means like figuring out how to own up to a mistake in a way that feels authentic to your brand, that doesn't destroy your trust and credibility. So yeah, it is something that's extremely important.
Even though Kevin continuously tries to fracture his own brand by using words like LinkedIn incest and butthole frequently. And
I think that is additive to my brand rather than a rupture.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Kevin. And with that, we'll transition over to Taz to talk about metrics and LinkedIn growth. Taz, what are common mistakes people make when looking at their LinkedIn analytics?
Yeah, when I started doing this, I looked at it through a marketer's lens, not necessarily a creator or someone who wanted to just grow a following. I was obsessed with it, like I get obsessed with anything that has some kind of numbers, a measurement, or attribution to it. So it's almost a little bit of a game for me. But some of the things that I see people post a lot about and talk a lot about is they get hung up on the reach aspect, right? How can I hack the algorithm? Why do carousels work better than images, than text posts? First of all, that may not necessarily be true. And so there are general guidelines. People are like, hey, carousels tend to work better. Cool. Or the algorithm will promote reach for a carousel. I haven't actually found that to be true for my own content. My top performing posts, 4 out of 5 have been text. And so I think at the end of the day, format would be second to whatever content you're providing. And then also the important thing is to understand your audience maturity at that point, right? So if you are just starting to write on LinkedIn, most of your connections and followers tend to be people that you know. So they're invested in you personally. So when you share something more personal, that data point is going to explode and then tell you, oh, I guess personal content is doing better. I'm going to keep doing personal content. But then that's not going to generate the type of attention that you think that you want. But then now someone who has 40, 50,000 followers, maybe they're looking for more actionable, value-based content. Maybe reach is promoted with imagery or frameworks or carousels. So I think it's important to take everything in context, where you are in the maturity curve of your audience growth.
Have you considered that maybe just your carousels suck unless I'm the one designing them?
I do try to assign work over to you, and you're very slow. It's like you're busy or something with paying clients.
Try to assign. You succeed at assigning.
Yeah. Kevin has tried to design a carousel for me before, which I have not used because it didn't go with my brand. But apparently, I know more things about brand identity than he does. So. Next question,
Yeah,
please.
and I think those are important differences that you point out too, where even that the success of a post, it really depends on what your goal is, or what you're going after on LinkedIn, and that does change over time. So I think those are great points. So the next question is like, what metrics should someone look at outside of the obvious impressions, reactions, and reposts?
All right. All the things that I tend to account for that a lot of even analytics platforms like Shield or Publer or Tapio or whatever don't do is I look at the DMs and follower count by day. Yes, it is manual and tedious. You got to win somehow. And then I also do a lot of self-reported attribution. So again, I look at it through that marketing lens, right? How did you hear about me? If I get on a call with a client, then they'll say, hey, so-and-so referred you, or I saw a comment on this person's profile that you had left, and that's how I contacted you. So I always ask them for the journey because it's never linear. And sometimes, especially with LinkedIn, your posts have a long lifespan. So compared to Twitter, where one tweet might have a 24-hour lifespan, on LinkedIn, you'll see posts from a couple weeks ago. And if it's a good post, you're still getting dividends 3 or 4 weeks later. So then you ask people, hey, what is the post? And it's, oh, I don't remember. It was something to do with X. And maybe topically, you can connect the themes then to say, okay, like Linda said, if you're producing content on 3 core pillars, and if they talk about, oh, it was some post related to website or LinkedIn growth or whatever, then you know what kind of drove them to you in general, rather than attribution to a single post. So I always look at per day impressions, reactions, reposts, but also DMs, follow account, and self-reported attribution.
Yeah, I think those are great metrics, and I like how comprehensive it is because it gives you different ways to look at it. And then there are the things you can't measure, where you'll be on a call with a prospect or a client and they're telling you, hey, I really like your LinkedIn posts, even though they've never engaged with the post, and you wouldn't have known if they didn't bring it up on the call. And I know that happens with a lot of creators, and it doesn't even require that much engagement for clients and prospects to notice. So, Taz, how can LinkedIn creators accurately forecast or even predict growth?
Again, my marketer lens comes in handy here because I always have to forecast revenue growth or pipeline growth at my company. So I apply the same thing to LinkedIn. But essentially, after you've had at least 30 days of data, right? And by that, you've posted consistently for 30 days, whatever your cadence is, right? After a month of posting consistently, now you can look at the data and say, all right, my plan is, or having a goal sometimes holds you accountable. So if you're saying, hey, I want to get X amount of growth by this month, is that what I'm on the trajectory for? And then looking at what your averages are. For example, if you average like 20 follower growth per day, then on a conservative level, you can account for 20 follower growth per day. Some days might be lower, some might be higher, getting those averages and forecasting the growth out. I've done it for a couple of people here. It's a lot of fun because it keeps you accountable and it says, okay, and you can tell, right? Linda said, some days I don't feel like posting. That was me on Tuesday. I'm like, whatever. I don't feel like doing it. Even though Tuesday is supposed to be a hot day to post, I don't stress about it. But then I still show up for other people and support them. And you can still see growth that comes in there. Or you can see when your growth falls off. I went on vacation last week. I knew that it wasn't going to be as active, which is fine. But then you take those, you annotate for times like that where you're saying, okay, I don't necessarily have to post. I don't necessarily have to show up, but this is what the trade-off is because of that. And then obviously, if you have a killer post, you're going to beat your averages for the day or for the week. But that's where you can forecast growth pretty easily and then give yourself a goal to go after.
Yeah, I really like that. With followers too, I like to even look at who the followers are and just the quality of followers because I have noticed that there are certain posts that just, from my perspective, bring in higher quality followers or more of a qualified type of follower, I would say. But those are great points. And then Taz, do you have a system for collecting and analyzing the right data when it comes to LinkedIn?
Yeah, so I talked about this a little bit before, but you got to ask yourself what your goal is. And obviously that might change. When I started posting on LinkedIn, I was employed full time at a company running their digital and website. I was posting more as a creative exercise. And I'm like, you know what? There's no organic way to bring up in conversation like Kevin and I hanging out and it's, hey, by the way, so website optimization is a really cool thing. He's gonna be like, what are you talking about? So it's a cool way to just share your ideas and thoughts and open a feedback loop. That's all I was doing, was just to showcase some expertise. And then as time went on, and then I was thinking, oh, a prospect of working for myself is looking lucrative. And so your goals will change from I'm building an audience to now I'm trying to generate business. And let me just tell you, follow count isn't everything, right? I gave you a method to forecast that growth. If that's your goal, then that's going to be your focus. But for me, I'm looking now more at depth, right? I don't care if I have 4 or 5,000. I'd rather have a few hundred engaged people in my ICP who want to have conversations. That's more important to me. So I'm going to look at my DMs more than I'm going to look at my follower count. And depth matters. And I'll tell you this, there are people with a lot lower followings who are more profitable than people who have 40, 50, 60,000 plus. And sometimes when you're writing viral content or you're trying to go after virality, that means you are applying to many people, which is probably like you can't sell to a lot of those people. Sometimes virality is just a way of it telling you that you're probably too broad at this point. So those are some things where you got to start with what your goal is. And also now the job market is crappy. There are thousands of applicants per job. So if you're an applicant and you want a new job and that's your goal, now you're going to start networking with your ICP companies, not ICP, IEP, your ideal employer profile.
Wait, the insane clown posse? Are we trying to attract Violent J out here?
No, Kevin, quiet, please mute. Andrew, can you mute him? Okay, thank you. But if you're going after that, then that's where you're going to focus a lot of your attention on, is the type of companies that you want to get into or build a network around. So those are your measures of success depending on what your goal is.
And that task to do this, do you look at the analytics weekly? Do you track them somewhere? How do you stay on top of this?
I do track them weekly. I've used analytics tools Like Shield, Authored Up just released their version of it. LinkedIn Analytics, pretty poor that way. But honestly, nothing is good enough for me, apparently. So I actually track mine in an Excel sheet that I have separately. And then I put in my content, I add extra columns, that kind of stuff. And I filter and look at my analytics through different lenses, like what formats work better, what days tend to work better. So LinkedIn will tell you that Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are the best days to post. My most popular posts were Fridays and Saturdays. And I don't even post most Saturdays. Like, it's good to take those benchmarks that people tell you, but apply it to your own data. But the only way you can do that is by starting to post and starting to write and collect those data points. Don't look at it as, oh, people are going to think I'm cringy, I'm posting content, whatever. My husband's going to make fun of me, which he does every day. That kind of stuff. Just ignore that. Put it out there as a data point. And when you look at it through that lens, like a scientist running an experiment, all the fear washes away and you're looking at it as a data point and something that's going to give you information to double down on later.
Meet more spreadsheets, meet more data. Andrew, are we done talking about the boring stuff yet?
Oh my God, I love it. You guys, if you want templates for anything, hit me up. Having a baby, got one. Insurance company, got one. Traveling, I have one. Just seriously, hit me up if you need a template.
I was going to say, Tats, you should do like giveaways and posts and offer your templates. I'm sure a lot of people would
I really should. I know many people do ask for them too. And that's an example of me not listening. Just FYI. Okay.
One of the many examples.
I was just going to add too that it takes a long time too.
Yes.
If you're just starting, because I've been active on LinkedIn, really active for going on 3 years, and it took 3 months before I saw anything, and then 6 months really before I got traction. That was doing at least like 3 to 5 times a week posting and interacting. Yeah. But people give up when they don't see results right away.
And I think that's because so many people promote the overnight success thing. That's not a real thing for majority of people in any sense, not with LinkedIn growth, not with business growth. It's almost like you're continuously pulling at that slot machine lever and then suddenly something's going to explode. And so that's why I do the forecasting thing. And I'm like, let's take your average, look at that per week, and it's going to give you a very realistic idea of, okay, hey, it might take me 7 or 8 months of posting consistently if I just put out my regular content before I, hit 1,000 followers or something like that. It's just going to put things in perspective. And then you can decide at that point, do I want to put in the work? Because it is work. And for me, I'll tell you, I went from 1,200 to now like 4,600. I started posting in April, but I had a couple of bangers in there that helped me. But if I had just done my regular consistent growth, it might have taken me a little bit longer. But again, I went from 1,000 followers to 150,000 followers, and now I'm the LinkedIn voice and blah, blah, blah. There are people who purchase those. There are people who hack their way into it. There are engagement pods. There are all of these things. If that's really what you want to do, is showcase a number. But if you're trying to monetize that attention, you've already failed.
Yeah, that hasn't really been my experience. I basically catapulted myself into internet fame pretty much instantaneously. So yeah, I don't really know what Toss is talking about here. Just hasn't been my experience.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and with that, we'll go ahead and open it up for questions and comments. So if you'd like to speak, click the raise button on your screen and we'll bring you up. So I see a few people here, so I'll start bringing up. Jill, I'm bringing you up.
Hey guys.
Jill, hi.
What's up, Jill?
I love listening in. There are a couple of things I wanted to say. Linda, I really love your podcast. I listen pretty often. And I don't know, I've been listening the whole time, but I had to step in and out. I don't know if you guys mentioned it, but I'm just mentioning, if you don't listen to her podcast currently, you should, especially if you're into B2B and copywriting. So that's just
I'm Andrew. He was a guest on my podcast.
Oh, yes, that's true. And then the other thing is that Kevin and I were actually just talking yesterday, and we very briefly touched upon something that I think deserves some emphasis. And Kevin, you mentioned it today that your authentic voice and personality should really clearly shine through when you're posting on LinkedIn. And if you have something like a coffee chat, or you meet somebody in real life, or you have a business meeting with a lead, for an example, you want your representation to be accurate and who they really feel that you are. And that should come through both ways. And the reality is, everything's so much easier when you act as your true self. I think it also really helps in curating your network the way you want it to look, because then your network will also embrace you for who you are because you're being real. I just wanted to place a little emphasis on that when you guys were talking about today, since Kevin and I literally just spoke about it very briefly yesterday.
So if everyone who's coming up to make questions can also talk about how I make great points, that would be great. Would love that. Jill's already set this conversation Q&A off great. But yeah, I agree, Jill, obviously, that when you meet somebody off of LinkedIn, a lot of the times I meet people, they're like, I feel like I know you. And at the end of the conversation, they're like, yeah, this is exactly how I thought you would be after seeing your posts. So when you set those expectations properly in the brands that you build, you are setting yourself up for success as you have those conversations, because they already know who you are, what it's going to be like to work with you. And people buy from people. So they're going to respect who you are, and they're going to come to talk to you, and they're going to want to have that experience of what they get from interacting with your brand online.